Hey everyone, and welcome back to another roundup. Another Kickstarter project has collapsed and taken $8 million with it, but there actually might be more to this one. Then World of Warcraft had a surprisingly early influence on Valve. Yes, GabeN, leader of Valve, managed to make himself a tidy $20 an hour playing WoW. Then Final Fantasy VII Remake has officially broken its street date, with actually a bit of help from Square Enix, and a whole bunch more. First though, we've got an announcement. Thanks to the support of our patrons, especially needed in these times now that content has often made it a loss because ad rates have collapsed, we are now launching the Daily Briefing. There is a lot of news, and that news moves very fast. The Daily Briefing is your summary of the gaming news delivered quickly, objectively to your inbox, also covering the stories that do not actually fit on the channel. Patrons, it's up now today, so check out the page and expect those posts every day. This channel's got a team of 4 people full-time, so patrons, you guys are keeping that going. We thank you for it, and with that, let's get into the news. And to kick things off today, well, once again, it's time to pour one out for another dead Kickstarter project. Chronicles of Elyra, an epic story MMORPG with aging and death, hit Kickstarter in 2016 with a funding goal of $900,000. The campaign, though, eventually brought in $1.4 million, which, combined with additional crowdfunding efforts on the game's own website, over time has brought the all-time crowdfunding total to nearly $8 million. This weekend, though, the team, Soulbound Studios, laid off all staff, closed their online store, and shuttered the game indefinitely. Why? Well, the official reason is that they simply ran out of money, but there may be a little bit more to talk about with this story. So, in September 2016, Soulbound posted an update that the $900,000 target was merely seed funds. In reality, it was actually going to be closer to $4 million to push the game over the finish line. Now, you're probably noticing a bit of a discrepancy here, right? Nearly $8 million achieved over its life, but they said at that point $4 million required, and now they're shutting down because of a lack of funds. In some ways, yeah, it doesn't add up. Could you say this is a money grab or a Day of Dragons situation? I could see how that's a knee-jerk response, but there actually could be more to this story, though. Something doesn't really sit right with me with this whole thing. Many team members are still continuing or offering to continue working on the game in their free time, and the studio's CEO, Jeremy Walsh, worked on the game solo for 15 years. That's a level of dedication that doesn't quite gel with a smash and grab approach. Thankfully, though, there does appear to be a less questionable, but ultimately no less disappointing angle to consider for this story. In a developer update, Walsh detailed how publishers had been interested in Chronicles of Elyra at a premature stage. Now, the early involvement resulted in a lack of demo material available for the studio to show, and seeking comfort, the publishers wanted to take over a bit more of development and day-to-day management of the company. Now, apparently, when Soulbound declined that, the publisher interest swiftly vanished. Given what we know now, maybe the publishers were onto something there. Could poor management, poor timing, and scope creep actually have, been an issue from early on in this project? I'd say it's likely a case of the team being a bit stuck in the weeds, right? Not having a larger view of the situation, and maybe sometimes being led along by publishers. I mean, think about the risk profile of a publisher who is expressing interest in a project. For the publisher, it is just some time for their acquisitions team, just a few emails. There's not that much risk there. So a publisher asking to see some features or guiding a bit of development in the pre-deal stage, I mean, that can happen. There's no risk for the publisher to do that. But for the studio, though, yeah, the risk profile is entirely different. That costs a lot of time and money, and situations like that can mislead studios into spending time and money on things that they shouldn't, on features that they shouldn't. Now, that's a mistake that I personally felt in the early days of us wasting months. And months are very expensive when you've got a team. Now, that's something where, me foregoing a wage from that, and my co-founder also foregoing a wage, we were able to get through all that stuff, but, many indies can't actually do that, and that is something that can kill companies. So you gotta wonder if a bit of that happened here. Going back to the story, though, a lack of publisher interest, according to them, basically meant that Soulbound became entirely reliant on crowdfunding, and that is something that the studio never wanted. Now, the logic, apparently, was that a project that's successfully surviving in crowdfunding wouldn't need the investment, so a publisher wouldn't be interested. But a failing project, well, that's too risky to invest in. Soulbound basically planned to push the game as close to completion as they could, that basically investors then would not be able to say no because it would have been very de-risked. But that is where everything ended up unraveling because it didn't work. Soulbound really did run out of money, and I guess the situation where it never really should have. Chronicles of Elyra was a highly ambitious project, and that's kind of what made it appealing to people, right? It promised, a nuanced fantasy MMORPG experience that many players really have been clamoring for. And through that, it birthed an active, engaged community, but, you gotta wonder, with the time there, was there scope creep? Why did things not happen as fast as they should have? I think they were in a situation where, their initially low Kickstarter goal for a game like that, people would have thought, okay, cool, we'll jump in. But then I think, the later requests for additional funds and additional crowdfunding efforts, I think they were successful because of that, existing active community. But I suppose there must have just been diminishing returns there. I suppose what I will say to me is a bit weird is there is a part in the letter from Walsh where he basically says that they could have, or they think they could have got another sort of a Kickstarter sort of Kickversary, I think they called it, event going, right, where they could have got all their old items and perks and things like that and done another funding wave, but that basically after discussions on balance they decided they wouldn't do that, supposedly because of the current global situation. Wink wink nudge nudge, can't say what it is here, but you get what I mean. Now I will say, whenever I read that didn't really ring true. I mean, if that is the decision that they made, I have to wonder if they are using the global situation as a little bit of an excuse to, change their development situation there, let's just say. I don't know, it just did seem a bit weird. I don't think that global situation is really something that would realistically do that. I just have to wonder, were there deeper problems with the studio's finances or things like that maybe led to them thinking, yeah, we could get some money in now, but the whole thing is doomed anyway, and now is the time to call it quits. Hard to say there. Overall, if I was being a bit more conservative in my analysis here, I would say that this game's demise just seems like mismanagement and a little bit of bad luck. Game development is, of course, a very expensive thing, but the studio did burn through their runway with little to show for it. Maybe that could have been managed better. A Kickstarter post does mention needing to pay staff wages and insurance. Now, we don't really know exactly how big the studio was. It says 11 to 50 on its LinkedIn, so that's just too wide of a range for us to really read into it. Now, the game technically is only postponed, and there are still staff who are working on it, just, I guess, for passion in their spare time. And Walsh has described this as being the lowest point in the hero's journey, because, I mean, of course he has, but it just seems like a really weird situation. It seems like mismanagement. I'll tell you what my gut feeling is here, right? That they were in development and that they just feature creeped and scope creeped, and that more and more things were being done that were not core to the game. There were maybe just little side things that didn't matter that much, where it seems to me like surely there would have been a way to get this out the gate a little bit faster with less features, to sort of go for a minimum version to get it out there for the community, maybe to get that interest there, maybe to have publishers see, oh, maybe there is something going on here. And just that sort of ran out of steam. That is my gut reaction, gut feeling anyway. As for any thoughts of this being a big cash grab or them lining their pockets, it doesn't really seem like it. It does seem like they ran out of money. We would just need to see, was money being embezzled from the company or anything like that, which obviously at this stage, we just cannot say. So there you go. That's that story. Obviously a pretty sad one. If everything's all good and in good faith, then hopefully this game is able to get into existence in some stage. But yeah, I suspect given the drama here, we might find out a little bit more over time. Maybe a team member will leak to the press or something like that. And next up, Modern Warfare 2's remaster is due to launch today after being leaked like crazy. The PlayStation Store in Germany leaked a trailer and screenshots, and it was reportedly even playable for a short time there, which is a bit wild. Now, basically, this is just a remaster of the campaign with some revamped maps being added to Modern Warfare's multiplayer, so as to, not split the community of the game. It's going to cost $25, and it's going to be bundled in with some, various, cosmetics. And yeah, I mean, stealth launches, they're a bit of a thing these days. I suppose a bit less stealthy when all of your partners manage to leak it. All the same though, COD is in a very solid position here. Modern Warfare seems to be doing well, Warzone seems to be doing well, Mobile seems to be doing well, and I imagine that given how revered Modern Warfare 2 is, this will do pretty well. Nostalgia bait tying into a big Battle Royale launch, I mean, that seems like a pretty obvious win to me. Next up, a bit of a more light, fun story. GabeN used to farm gold in World of Warcraft. Now, this actually is quite relevant. So in an interview with Edge, Gabe basically said that early that Valve viewed games as entertainment experiences only, but that this perception actually shifted when Valve began to think about games as productivity platforms. So as a proof of concept of that, Gabe himself decided to be a World of Warcraft gold farmer for a while, and he was quickly successful, making a spectacular wage, that's his quote, which was about $20 an hour. So after this, GabeN's insights motivated Valve towards exploring ways of making gaming more productive and more valuable, and this in turn led to the Steam Workshop. And essentially, Valve's philosophy with this was that everybody could be a content creator, and that, if anything, that actually ended up working out too well for them. GabeN actually recalled stories early on of parents believing that their kids were actually selling drugs for Valve, or something like that, because of the sheer amounts of money. PayPal would be notifying parents that their child was exceeding monthly deposit limits. Parents would actually call up Valve and be told that their child was selling hats in Team Fortress 2 and making 500 grand a year from doing it, which is wild. But this mentality, games as platforms, has informed a lot of Valve's decisions regarding multiplayer games ever since. And it's important I note there, when I say games as platforms, I don't necessarily mean like the live service stuff that would be conjured up if I mention, say, Anthem. I more mean that with Valve, they're thinking that there is a machine of productivity here that could be enabled if you create the correct incentive structure. So given the incentive structure of the TF2 hats, people were able to do content creation there, thus making the hats exist. Now take that perspective over to paid mods, and I think paid mods make complete sense within, I suppose, the ideology and the thinking of Valve, which in this case is that gaming as a hobby can be a platform for productivity. So yes, a bunch of tools have been given to players via mod kits. Well, what if there was a financial incentive for people to make those mods in their spare time? Could there then be a situation where we have professional mod creation? And would that not give people a lot of content that they'd be interested in paying in? That basically is the kind of way that Valve actually think about things. And while they don't always get things right, I do think that they think about problems in a uniquely interesting way for our industry. Oh, and while we're mentioning Valve, yeah, they just hit 23 million concurrents on Steam. Another peak, and I imagine we will see more peaks in the near future. And speaking of Steam player counts going up, well, Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. We've been waiting for this one for a very long time. I love Warband, and many people I think would consider Mount & Blade to be niche, but Bannerlord just exploded out the gate, reaching a peak of almost 180 concurrents on launch, which, hey, it's very, very exciting. It's not perfect, it's just over 80% positive in terms of its Steam ratings right now, but 180k players are playing and 250k watching on Twitch for a $50 early access game. That's pretty bloody astounding. Next up, Valorant. Its closed beta is launching on April 7th in Europe and North America. Riot actually just held an alpha test with pro players and streamers, so yeah, expect this launch to have a pretty darn heavy Twitch integration. And I suppose with that, we'll see just how much hype there actually is around this and whether it will really hang around. I'd especially wonder if we're seeing maybe, beta tournaments. How would they compete with, say, CSGO viewership? I think there's a lot of interesting insights that we'll be able to glean once that actually comes out. Then next up, a fun and pretty positive story, actually. Physical copies of Final Fantasy VII Remake have been appearing over the weekend, and that's over a week before its release date. Now, this is because several suppliers actually broke the street date, but they did so more or less with Square's blessing, and I think that's the interesting angle here. The company previously released a statement in which they were warning that they couldn't really control when the game would release because of the ongoing, global situation, but that their highest priority was just that their fans would actually receive the game. So yeah, they seem to be fine with street dates being broken, but they've just said that they politely ask for no spoilers. Overall, I think that's pretty good. And then finally, something utterly stupid to round it off with. Remember when Dead or Alive 6 offered PS4 players the chance to change their hair colors for $1 a change? Well, that wasn't really well received, and the feature has now been revised. Hair color can now be unlocked permanently for any hairstyle that offers it, and all premium tickets used to purchase hair colors have been refunded. Like, let's be real, the new system is better. Once you unlock a hair color, you've permanently unlocked it for all the hairstyles that support it. But that means that every single hair color is its own DLC, its own microtransaction. I just want to point out how absolutely bizarre and weird that is. But that said, if you look at the Steam page for, I mean, a lot of the Dead or Alive games, especially this one, and you just click on the DLC button, you see this massive expansive list. So it's just totally a thing with, you know, that brand of character fighter. So there you go. A little bit of a weird situation, and it's pretty darn stupid, and it's something that I don't think people should really be supporting. Anyway, that is it for today's edition of the Roundup. If you would like to get the daily briefing delivered to you, then hit up our Patreon. We're running that 5 days a week. And yeah, that's basically where our team is going through all the gaming news. We want to bring it to you, but we want to bring it to you in a really short, condensed format where you just quickly understand what's happened, get a few bullet points of analysis, and where you can really just view one thing in the morning with your coffee whenever it suits you, and you'll just be caught up to date and you'll just understand. So yeah, and it really does help us run everything as well. You know, we do have a team of 4 people, I guess 3.5 full-time on this channel. So, you know, yeah, that's, I mean, if you think about it, right, we do like our reports, and we do our reports like our single topic stories, but roundups like this are a lot more work, right? Because like for every one of these roundups that we do, we actually research more stories than actually make it into the video because there's other constraints in what actually works for a video. But doing this sort of more, you know, multi-topic coverage, yeah, it's a good bit more expensive to do. I mean, a lot more expensive to do because you've got to research, you know, many more stories instead of just one for a video. And yeah, you know, the support of the patrons really is what allows that to happen. And as time goes on, and hopefully as that support increases, we'll be able to do more and more with our team. We've already got some pretty, I'd say, exciting and ambitious plans there. But anyway, more on that later. Thank you for watching. Thank you to the patrons for supporting us. And with that, I'll see you next time.